Good afternoon and welcome to United TV. Today is July 26, 2024. I'm Kamal Erkan. Today we have our Senate Majority Leader, Brian Townsend, with us. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So, thank you for taking the time. I know you are working and you guys are busy, but I think that this one thing is uh, the, the Senate is off until September, so you guys maybe are taking a little break. Uh, and I'm sure a lot of people are bothering you for what needs to be happening for the next year. So I want to actually start with what's from you, what's the latest from you, and I have obviously questions around U.S. politics, healthcare, economic issues, and the election is coming, and this election is going to be, as you know, it's going to be very different than anything else we have seen ever before. So we'll go to those, but let's start with you. What's the latest? What are you guys doing these days? And then I'll go from there.
Sure. No, I appreciate the opportunity to join. As you had said, we finished the legislative session on June 30th, and we're out until early January. But it is a year-round effort for sure. We're already having meetings and discussing initiatives for 2025. My schedule ramps down a little bit in July, coming off a legislative session. I've become like a professional summer camp driver for my 7-year-old and 4-year-old, so that's always fun. And I'm a practicing attorney as well, but definitely a relatively calmer time compared to June in particular. I would say a key item that we had worked on was House Bill 350 in the healthcare space with regard to trying to create a more sustainable cost framework or arena, particularly with regard to the hospitals. So much of the cost increases in Delaware healthcare had come in the hospital space. And they dominate the market. It's a small market, small jurisdiction Delaware, and the small number of players that dominate it, and that was a key part of it. But we have more. We have more to do. We need to take a look at pharmaceuticals in particular as well. So I'm happy to go into more detail about that. There's primary care efforts.
Were you happy with the outcome of the 350, HB 350?
Um, it was a very grueling process. So to say, am I happy with it is kind of a little bit hard because you go through this sort of political and policy battle. But I guess what I'd say is I'm happy to the extent that I very much believe in what the framework can be. I believe it was important for Delaware to finally put some teeth into what for many years the governor had been trying to do through a benchmark process that didn't have any teeth, didn't have any consequences, and so it wasn't working. And so I think having this bill become law and having teeth now in the process, there's a great potential in Delaware for us to do a better job in healthcare, not only in terms of cost, stemming the massive cost increases, but having much broader conversations with regard to investment in healthcare and what a optimal, effective healthcare system will look like.
So now the concern is I'm hoping that it's going to work out, and I'm hoping the committee members of this new uh, vehicle, I guess, that process is really important. Who's going to be there, how much experience they have, and all that. But one of the big issues, which you and we discussed this before, when there's a huge monopoly, it's difficult to get certain things done, and I still don't know why certain things have to be so expensive. I think it was in May. Stephanie Hansen was our guest, and she shared one of her personal issues with healthcare, and it was some injection that was 6 times more expensive. Same injection if it's done in the physician's office versus if it was done in the hospital, and we can't afford this. There has to be some accountability, but as you know, the hospital lobbies are so strong, and also like uh, what actually kind of frustrates me is they almost blame the victim. I posted their 5 year net income. Net income of a nonprofit hospital is $1 billion, and a smaller hospital down in Kent, Bay Health Medical Center, is 450 million. Like these are like humongous numbers. Like how can we get to those when actually you are talking about nonprofit. But I guess we'll find out. We were really following that very closely. One other thing that really bothered me is when they took the physician, they almost forced the physicians to go to Dover to support with their white code. I'm like, hey, white code is not for that. So you cannot use the white code in that setting. So, and physicians are not your peons, so you have to be respectful. But I'm glad that it passed. Like there has to be some way of some form of another layer that's going to help for the healthcare costs, which again, 1/3 of the state budget is being spent. Now, one thing that I see, Brian, if you would like to talk about, I think Melissa Minor Brown's bill, the medical school in the state of Delaware, that passed. Can you give us a little bit on that? I
Sure.
think just passed on 6/26.
Yeah, those are, I think, a resolution, concurrent resolution started in the House with Representative Minor Brown, and I believe I was a Senate sponsor of that, encouraging the development of medical school. What I found interesting about it in particular was I hadn't been front and center on this over the years, but I think what I had recalled hearing a few years ago was the idea of building a brick and mortar medical school from the ground up, standard medical school, put one in Delaware. And instead, I think what's kind of come from these conversations that have been happening the past several years is the idea it wouldn't necessarily be a medical school built in that sort of style. I'm not even sure kind of what exactly physical footprint it would be, as opposed to the idea of trying to utilize Delaware's healthcare framework to facilitate clinical medical education, placements, medical students or medical graduates to try and build out the workforce that we need throughout Delaware, not just in Sussex County. But so I took great heart of the idea that there can be a lot of win-wins here for us to try and have medical education happen in Delaware, even if it's not, as I understand it, a full-blown traditional brick and mortar medical school. More to learn about that for sure. And there's no definitive steps right now that say, okay, we are definitely doing X, Y, and Z. But there've been a lot of conversations between higher ed. I think Del State University has been part of it, among others, to try and figure out how we can facilitate medical education and medical care in Delaware where it's needed.
I see. So I think in partnership with University of Delaware would be the right way to go. They have a great nursing school, but we'll see. We'll see what's going to happen. Now, Brian, I want to talk about a little bit on the physician employment. This is the data from MGMA. So right now, the trend is it's about like three-quarters of the physicians are employed by the hospital systems. And in, as we get a little bit older, so we can read everything. So I'm gonna need some help. In 2019, that number was at 62%. So it's at almost 78%. That number is increasing and increasing. Every time there's more employment of the physicians by the hospital, the healthcare cost goes up. Mm. So because they're becoming part of that system, how do you see this from your side? Like, do you think this trend is going to go up? As you know, we represent the private physicians, private ambulatory practices. How the state is going to help us with this trend, that we can actually turn it down a little bit?
Right. No, I think anytime you have sort of that kind of level of market dominance in any arena, you're going to have some downsides for sure. Often in ones that overpower some of the upsides that you can have, like through economies of scale and whatnot. I think there's a few different things happening in some states, some non-state, that are going to be related to some of this. I mean, ChristianaCare, certain physicians within ChristianaCare recently voted to unionize. There's going to be a change in a variety of ways with regard to what it's like to be a physician within ChristianaCare. You also have, as we said, HB 350, the Hospital Cost Review Board, that I think has great potential to try and reorient a variety of things that happen in the Delaware healthcare space, with a lot more specific, based on a lot more specific data that we'll finally have access to and be able to make some better policy decisions with regard to that. So that stands some great potential. I think that the efforts over the past few years to try and enhance primary care have been minimally effective, essentially. There's been a variety of ways in which those efforts have not borne the kind of fruit that they could have borne, that we hope they would bear. And so I think there's going to be gearing. I know there's going to be gearing up because I'm going to be leading it to try and revisit that. I think there was actually an op-ed in the New York Times recently talking about Medicaid reimbursements for primary care and how you've got to enhance those. I mean, Medicaid's a state administered program. So I don't recall, frankly, from the op-ed if they pointed to any specific jurisdiction, but the general sentiment was Medicaid reimbursements for primary care writ large are lagging big time. And because of that, you have fewer and fewer people going into primary care for that particular population. And that's a big problem. So I think Delaware's Medicaid program, Delaware's state employee and state retiree health programs need to do more to focus on preventive care, primary care. Reimbursement should be higher. I mean, we get into this all the time on the Primary Care Reform Collaborative, or had over the past few years, where it's almost like not even a safe space to talk about the idea of providing more financial resources for primary care, because immediately then people flip to the conversation of, oh, well, how do you measure value? And it's sort of like, do you guys not understand how bad it is where if you can't keep people in the profession, if you can't have people available to take basic health checkup appointments, basic stuff. I mean, you want to do like a value formula for measuring blood pressure and checking someone's heart. It's frustrating how kind of like hyper specialized or mechanical some of this has gotten in the healthcare space when we look and we see a massive workforce shortage issue. So I think that we have got to do a far better job from the state side of things to try and provide the right kinds of resources, the right kinds of incentives. There's no doubt more groups of physicians can do certain things and adopt certain frameworks that do enhance value. There's no doubt that traditional fee for service is not the way just to go, no questions asked. But we've got to do a better job ultimately of putting, our money where our mouth is with regard to primary care, preventive care, equitable access to healthcare. You've got to invest in not just people, Delawareans at large, but invest in the physicians and nurses, providers who are going to actually make the care possible. And so I do think, as frustrating as it is to not have as much progress as we should see right now, I remain hopeful because I think that there are the right people sort of in the space talking still, but we have got to come together in a more candid and bold way to try and make those changes happen.
So primary care, I mean, with your efforts, actually, I have to give you a lot of credit for this because this was one of your bills. Last year in 2023, primary care did get more support. That's about 6.3% more. I know that's not the final numbers, but it's a start. In 2022, it was 4.7% up. So I think it's going on the right direction. And one of as many of my providers are being primary care, and us being competing with the hospital systems, this is something that many people don't really understand. Now, when you have this nonprofit label, the issue is like you have the nonprofit label, then you have the higher reimbursements. So all of a sudden, the private practices become kind of like it's a disadvantage already. We are in a disadvantage from the start. So there's the higher reimbursement, there's the nonprofit, and there's this group who's trying to do the same thing the other system is doing with all that support. Now, what they do is they increase their salaries, the benefits, and they're making it almost so difficult to compete. But then the reality is, how Friends did this 4-day work weekend, it's not working. I mean, you have to produce, you have to work. You can't really just feed people if you are not producing. So they created this shortage and made maybe the shortage even bigger by limiting what physicians can do. Now, I remember several years ago where, in the hospital, the internist, as a hospitalist in one of the hospitals, would be able to see 25 to 28 patients. That average today is 15. and there is no increase of on quality of care. So he's or she's able to see only 15, and also, as you know, the medical schools with the limits of the number of hours that they have on a weekly basis, so they're at 55 hours. So they don't learn as much as they did before. So because in 3 years, it needs to be either you're going to increase it to 4 years if you don't want them to do those excessive hours, or they're going to do it. So now they come out and then they don't know as much as they did before. I mean, hired the most number of hospitalists as an individual because it was a private business that time. I interviewed more than 400 physicians that time, um, and it was just like you know the huge change in the new residents. They're like, oh, just give me 8 patients for 3 months. Well, if you get 8 patients, but then you want the work and life balance, you don't produce that. Like, how are we going to give you that salary? Now, hospitals promoted this, and well, they can because they have the money. So now that's why, in my opinion, part of the shortage is becoming bigger and bigger is because we are limiting what people can, and they do less. We already have less of them. I mean, physicians shortage is a huge problem, and I don't think it's helping the quality, the outcome of the patient qualities. One other thing that I want to tell you, and I don't want to bore you with this one, but I know you are so much interested in the healthcare
Yeah,
than
it's not boring at all. But I'm gonna
so.
respond. Go ahead. I'm gonna respond after that. I'm gonna respond to what you just said.
One of the things, one of my best friends, they have a little child who was uh, diagnosed with brain cancer. So this is several years ago. So they live in Canada, and then in Canada system, they couldn't get in to get an MRI. So I asked them to come down, and then one day I got a call from them. They're in Baltimore, and then they were at Johns Hopkins. So Johns Hopkins was in their old building that time. So now they have a new updated building. Uh, this guy is like extremely wealthy, this and that. But then, as you know, Johns Hopkins, they are one of the best in pediatric in the world. And there were 4 people in the room, 4 patients in the room. So they were sharing the room. But that means if they are still the number one or number two in pediatric in the world, so having 4 people, 4 patients in one room is not affecting the quality of care.
Mm.
So, and then, we were all there. There were other families. I stayed with them a couple of nights. Uh, Now you go to Christiana Hospital, you have a very nice, beautiful private room. Why? How is that impacting my outcome? My quality. It doesn't. So if we kind of force these things, I think it's going to be more and more and more difficult to keep things under control. But as you know, I'm not opinionated. I'm open for suggestions if there are better ones. So telehealth is one of the questions that I have for you. Last night we had the providers meetings, and everyone is texting me. And then once they heard that I was going to actually talk to you today, telehealth, is this going to stay permanent? And I told them yes, but I wasn't 100%. I'm like, well, let's ask Brian what's happening and what the plan is. Right now, I believe end of 2024 is when the expiration is. Can we actually count on telehealth staying permanently in the medical practices?
I think so. I'm gonna double check. I didn't realize 2024, the end of 2024 is a key deadline that hadn't been modified. I'll double check on that and circle back to you hopefully by Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Yeah,
Um,
state policy for the Medicare telehealth waiver timeline is December 31st, 2024.
Okay, I'll double check. I had not heard any concerns or any reasons to feel that we should not be making that permanent and continuing to advance it. So I will double check on my end and circle back and figure out what, if anything, needs to be done to clarify or to extend that. Obviously, you know, until I figure out exactly what the status is, I shouldn't opine on what the next steps would be to clarify that. But I had not heard anyone say that we should not be sort of all in on the framework that we had.
And that's what I heard from several different people who were on the show. And when I also talked to them in private, their understanding is this is going to be permanent. But I think now with the Medicare waiver is expiring, we may need to do something at the state level in case that happens. Now, I know there are some other bills coming up with the prior authorization. That's on the second stage, I believe. So they are improving certain things with the prior authorization bill.
Yeah, that's another big one. We had filed it in June of 2023. We were not able to reach consensus through 2024, unfortunately, so we didn't pass any legislation. We'll be coming back in 2025, I believe, with a consensus bill. There will be other items that are out of the consensus bill that are still important to talk about and important to see, whether we can continue to work and push. But we've got to, so we definitely have to do more work on that. But there are certain things about prior authorization that drive providers bananas, rightfully so. Like, there needs to be reform in this space, and we need to figure out how to do it as quickly and smoothly as possible.
So I know there are a couple other bills that's going to be on your agenda for next year. The chronic care management, I think there are some updates coming up. Uh, what's this preventing Medicare lab cuts? Like, are they trying to eliminate some of them? I don't have the details on this one, but like, are they going to pay less? I don't know, but
That's not ringing a bell. I need to look into that, but I don't recall that one.
yeah. So now the other thing is on the education side, I think we have. I want to be respectful to your time, so we have enough on the healthcare side. On the education side, there's something that I read with the teachers and with their sick leaves. Uh,
Mhm.
what is happening there?
So it's we passed the bill and the governor signed it already. It's very sad genesis of it. In August of 2022, it came to our maybe September 2022. It came to our attention there was a beloved educator in the Red Clay School District who had been diagnosed with, I believe it was a triple stage 4 cancer. And there's a photo right there of him, Mr. Chewjoy, and along with myself and State Representative Cindy Romer and Red Clay and DSCA advocate Mike Matthews. And basically, what had happened, it came to our attention because there's a social media plea that went out for people to try and come together and help out Mr. Chewjoy, including with teachers donating their accrued sick leave that he could use. And in the process of that, we heard an issue that apparently people had heard about over the years and no one had ever done anything about or been able to figure out what to do about it, which is to say that the existing law basically said if you are an educator and you want to donate your sick time to a colleague to use, that you then have to donate 2 of your days for your colleague to get 1 day.
Mhm.
And that just struck us as what's the reason for that other than to discourage the donation, I guess, of leave. And we talked to a lot of people, including people who had served and going back decades to the 1990s when apparently this had come about, and no one had a good answer as to why it was on the books, why it was still on the books, why there should be this penalty essentially against donating leave. So we passed a law to say, okay, it goes to 1-to-1 ratio. There's not, we basically got rid of the donation penalty.
So was that affecting the availability of those teachers, I guess? Because now they could take more time off.
They would be able to take more time. Basically, you have, this donated leave that's out there among the educator community, people who've worked and earned this leave time they have, and now you'd be able to make use of more of it if you don't have to forfeit a percentage of it to give your colleague much needed relief. Now, very sadly, Mr. Chewjoy passed away a few months prior to us being able to introduce and pass the bill, but he had inspired the bill, and the bill was named after him. So I'd hoped that we'd be able to pass it in time for him to be part of the final steps. But unfortunately, that he did pass. But he was just beloved and inspiring. And I met him one time in person. That's at a Starbucks, and he had this infectious energy and just a wonderful, wonderful person. So we were able to pass the bill ultimately, myself and State Representative Cindy Romer. The governor signed it in a very quiet ceremony with Mr. Chewjoy's mother and Mr. Chewjoy's brother in attendance. And thankfully now, when you have a colleague who needs leave, And since we have this framework of donated leave, now there won't be this penalty when you're trying to help someone in their most, most dire moment in life.
So do you think this also would help promote the public schools a little bit for like getting more teachers or better
Yeah,
attract for
I
those?
think so. I think it can. I mean, it certainly can show that we value, the work they put in and the benefits they earn, and we want to have fungibility of those in a more meaningful way. And so fungibility or flexibility. And so I think so. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be central to any of that, but I certainly think that I know that educators for a long time had been talking about it kind of more quietly than loudly publicly. I come from a family of educators. My brother, my sister-in-law, his wife are both educators. I've got two other siblings or siblings-in-law who are counselors in schools. And I brought this topic up one time, a year and a half ago at a family dinner, and they said, "Oh yes, we've heard about that. That's ridiculous. Why is that way?" So it was the kind of thing a lot of people were unimpressed with and frustrated by, but it hadn't coalesced into like a specific legislative initiative until very sadly Mr. Chujoy's illness and then fight and struggle against cancer and ultimately his passing. And so at least now we've kind of, made what I would say is make our law more reasonable. And if educators take note and find, more satisfaction out of that from a workforce perspective, great. But at the end of the day, at least for those people who need it in a really tough moment, a medical moment, they now are going to have a more forgiving, supportive system in place.
All right. So one, in the last 2 weeks, a lot of things happened in U.S. One is the assassination attempt with former president, and then there are other things happen. Now, President Biden now is stepping down from the candidacy, and Kamala Harris is running, but she's not endorsed by the party yet, right? So that's not definite yet. So,
Right. I mean, I think I think unofficially, I mean, it's,
right. So now, how do you see all these like Trump got a lot of momentum from right after the assassination attempt, uh, and now Biden stepping down right after that. I had a couple issues, and I know sometimes uh, I get some not so great comments from my Democrat friends. I thought that was a very late decision for Biden,
Mhm.
especially like 9 days before he stepped down. He gave this really strong message, and it's kind of like way too late in the game. Now you're a lawyer, so if I was a Democrat candidate, potential candidate, and I didn't run because Biden was running, and then now it's too late that I cannot get into that race, I would probably hire you to defend me. Would you defend me in that situation?
No, I mean, I think the reality is that there are processes in place for the party to decide who their nominee is, and they make use of a primary election system, but there are rules about how it needs to go if you do all of a sudden have a vacancy on the ticket. And here we do, because President Biden, I think, exceptionally selflessly and with patriotism beyond belief, decided to pull his name off of the ballot. And there are mixed feelings a lot of people have about that. They can admire him tremendously on a personal, professional, political levels, but still believe that that was the right decision. And I certainly think overall that I guess I was surprised. I didn't watch the debate. It was a legislative session night, and I wasn't able to watch the debate, but I certainly heard about it immediately and how concerned people were. And then I guess I was surprised that I thought that President Biden did a really good job coming into some of his interviews in July to make the point that he is still able to lead and prepared to lead, prepared to serve as president, including his performance at the NATO conference. And so, yes, he then made some subsequent slip ups, in media interviews, referring to Vice President Harris as President Zelensky as President Putin. He then referred to Vice President Harris as President Trump. But those are things that President Biden has done for years. And frankly, those are things that all of us do who are giving interviews frequently. So, but the problem is he's under such a microscope now that those slip ups are somehow part of some kind of cognitive issue as opposed to just how he's always been. And I think the reality is I was actually a little surprised, but by what seemed to be a mindset that the American people reached that they were not going to be supportive overall of President Biden, no matter how well he tried to do or did do in the subsequent weeks. So I think because of that, and because the stakes are so high, he decided to step back, and now Vice President Harris is almost certainly going to be the nominee, and essentially is the nominee, but needs to be finalized still. You mix into that, you reference the assassination attempt on President Trump, which is a stunning development, the likes of which I had never seen in my adult life. And it's just such a fluid, dynamic situation where the stakes for the United States and the entire world, frankly, couldn't be higher. So I think a lot has happened. A lot needs to sort of settle down the next couple of weeks to really be able to see how the American people feel about all of this. But I'll also note that you can have polls and whatnot about how the American people feel all across the country. That's all well and good, but the reality of our electoral system with the electoral colleges, it really comes down to a few 100,000 people in a few different swing states, 4 or 5 different swing states. So how do they feel? How do they feel about it? Because that's what's really going to determine the results of the election.
So I'm running a poll on Twitter, and I did this before. I don't know if you can get that, Sean. So I don't think I'm like, look, I'm the co-chair of Democrats governor candidates. I'm on the finance committee of Sarah McBride. I work with Lisa Rochester closely. I work with Kyle Evan Gay. So like almost 100% Democrats, right? So I don't think I have this like Republican followers on Twitter. I'm promoting this one to kind of see how it's going to end. It's just new, started yesterday, I think 2 days ago, between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And this is kind of interesting. It's like I haven't seen this before because I did this before with Trump and Biden. Uh, the numbers were reasonable. Now 87 to 13%. Do you think Kamala Harris has a chance?
I think so. I mean, I think that the amount of enthusiasm that seemed to sort of explode on the scene after the announcement from President Biden, and then um, the sort of very, I don't say immediate, but basically immediate coalescing around Vice President Harris. Um, the fundraise, amount of money she raised predominantly through small dollar donors in 24 hours, the massive Zoom calls that she has had with tens of thousands or even into 6 digits, 150,000 or so on her call last night, apparently. There's a level of enthusiasm both from a donor perspective and a volunteer sign up perspective that is stunning. So I think it'll take time to fully understand what happened and why. That's what historians are for, right? I mean, we're kind of living in history in this moment. But I think the reality is there's this a very interesting, I think, very inspiring groundswell that's happening and being supportive of Kamala. And some of the polling is now coming out that indicates a tighter race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump than had been the case between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And it'll just take time, though. It takes a few weeks to kind of like, get the announcement from President Biden, historic. The assassination attempt on President Trump, historic. Republican convention, now you have a Democratic convention soon, although it's a couple weeks out. So I think there might be like this, there might be a little time before the Democratic convention to do polling that sort of is a little bit clearer on where things stand and why. But you might really be into sort of like late August, early September before polling is sort of like is more indicative of where the race has coalesced. You've got the vice presidential nominee, JD Vance, that in the recent days, a lot of stuff's coming out about, and a lot of people are very concerned about, to the point where even media is reporting that President Trump himself now is having misgivings or regrets about choosing JD Vance, Senator Vance, as his nominee. So I don't. It's going to be crazy because it's such a short timetable to get to a November election. But I think that overall, right now, it's way too early to tell with any certainty as to what the actual polls would say. But I think there are these other metrics or indicators that are very, very favorable for a Kamala Harris presidential candidacy.
So in January, I did these polls, and like, because of this YouTube stuff, I had to kind of do some of these and promote them. So on January 18th, I asked whether or not Joe Biden should be running for re-election, should run for re-election, and at that time, almost 819 people answered, and 64% said no. And the one that you see on the screen now, I asked this question if 63.6% says he shouldn't be running, who would be the next or your choice? And then Kamala Harris had the lowest number there with 17%. Buttigieg, 18%. Gavin Newsom and his number two with 24%, and Michelle Obama was 41%. And I suggested that time that Michelle Obama should be the one with Gavin Newsom as the VP, but no one listens to me. And although Biden is kind of my neighbor, he doesn't call me these days. I should have given him better options. I'm concerned about Kamala Harris, and I'm open. I'm okay to talk about it openly. It's just it's risking the elections. Trump is coming a little bit too strong. Now, of course, this is election. Everything can happen. How many people are going to go and show up to vote is going to be very important. And small things can make a big difference, as you said. But they should utilize these Twitter polls. It's useful. Now, last thing, and I know we took a lot of time from you, Delaware governor's race. We have Bethany Hold, Matt Meyer, and Colin O'Mara. So what's your take for the Delaware race?
Certainly it's it's a three-way primary, which always makes it interesting. And we've got 6-7 weeks left to go, give or take, with the Delaware's primary in September. So I think that there's the amount of sort of third party money is going to be interesting, perhaps historic in its role here. And I'm sure there's going to be a good amount of negative campaigning, which is going to be unfortunate. So we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out. But anytime you have a three-way race, it becomes very dynamic and can be difficult to sort of peg with certainty. And at the end of the day, I think that there's no doubt that a gubernatorial race is important. There's no doubt it's important. But I also think that the legislature, and I can obviously speak primarily from the Senate side, are very prepared to have the kind of continuity I think is very important for Delaware's policies. We've been working on issues, and you and I have talked about them today a good amount with healthcare. We've worked on them the past few years. We're going to continue working on them. So I'm not trying to say that that a governor is not important. Obviously, she or he is tremendously important. But so is a legislature that is exerting itself in policy ideas and working with stakeholders to bring ideas to fruition, and that's what we're prepared to do. Obviously, we'll as soon as the primary is over, we will we'll work with whoever the nominee is to begin preparing for a successful 2025. But prior to that, I mean, you have legislators. We just finished session on June 30th. We're already taking stakeholder meetings for for legislative ideas in 2025, prior authorization, primary care investment, pharmaceutical cost review boards, all kinds of stuff we need to work on. And so we'll figure out who our partner is in the governor's office as soon as the polls close.
Well, it's going to be an interesting race, and from my point, I have a horse in the race, so I'm going to be biased, of course. I'm the co-chair, so but the one reason that I'm with Bethany is because I look at the experience, I look at the accomplishments, and what she has been managing so far, and being in different industries, healthcare, education, and understanding them at the really good level. I think she has a lot to offer. But of course, our voters are going to decide for that, and we wish them all best luck. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you are one of our go-to person when we have problems with our day-to-day healthcare related issues. You are extremely helpful for our physician community. And we are here to also support you at any time you need anything from us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it very much, and I look forward to the sixth time. Today's my fifth time. I look forward to the sixth time pretty soon.
Right. We'll be definitely having you again. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Donovan, you can join us.
Here I am. I'm back.
How did we do?
Really good. I think it's always good to have any type of political person, whether it's a representative, senator, governor, candidates for these positions. I always want to have them involved, make sure they're up to date with what's going on. That's kind of the whole gist of what we're doing here, to make sure everyone in the community and also those that are representing the community are up to speed with what's going on, and making sure that we're able to provide the most accurate and unbiased information out there to keep everyone informed.
So I think the Delaware governor race is going to be, again, it's very important, and we see a lot of good and bad news. And recently we had this blog posted. We had it up. Now, one of the reasons that I felt that we have to do this, well, it's kind of part of my job too, because again, we are with the governors. I don't know if this noise is coming from you or from you.
I think those are your email reminders.
I did turn it
15 minutes
out,
out.
but it's still does.
Outlook.
Anyway, hopefully people don't hear it too much. So this blog that I shared just this week, I actually just sit down and then see why I'm actually supporting Bethany Holdall. I see Bethany being the Delaware's future and champion for the future. And then I started kind of just making bullet points to see why, I could just do the support for other people as well. But we look at the legacy of the service, compassion, and the leadership. So she has been in this for so long, and she's doing it so well. And this is already the track record is there. When we look at what she does in education and healthcare, those are two biggest ticket items in the state of Delaware. We spend 67% of the total state budget between healthcare and education. So if someone doesn't understand or does not have the experience in those, they're not going to provide much solution to what's happening today. Public service, when she risked her own life to go out of her way to do the immunization for 4,000 people during the COVID time, hands-on, 4,000 people. Like how many people you were in touch, or I was in touch. We were fully isolated. She was in the field. So that's that's showing us there's that being the woman and being that motherly approach. That's I don't think man is capable of doing that. I think that's something that only woman can do, and I see that with my mom and my sisters, and I see that with Bethany, because she is shining from that point, who understands exactly what's happening in the public service. And you look at people's accomplishments and what they were able to establish, and she's shining from that point. Is she able to take new initiatives? We look at, you were in some of my meetings with her, her understanding of accountable care organizations, her understanding of healthcare expenditure, her understanding of education, and what new things can be done. She's not shying away from any of those. And you look at it, and she's loved by everyone she worked with. Governor Carney and several state and House representatives who are endorsing her, and several PACs are supporting, the union is supporting her. And we know that she's the right choice for Delaware. But main thing is her leadership. Like, several conversations I had with her, it was after 10, after 11. Last night I was talking to her, it was 12. Like, many people already in bed by 10. She's working. She's not shying away from any problems. The only thing that bothers me is because she's the only woman in the governor race, she's being picked on by these like all boys school people, like some newspapers. They bring the same issues on some stuff that was already answered last year. And every month they are bringing that up like an old, heat up Chinese food. That's very shameful. And the thing is, those types of news are just making her stronger and also making us more eager to help her. So we are going to go out of our way to help her, whatever we can do, and work with our people, with others to make sure that everyone understands she's the right choice for Delaware. When someone raises money from unknown resources, like we don't know where the money comes from, but all of a sudden you raise 3 times more than the person who's sitting in the governor's office as a lieutenant governor. And where did you get the money? No one is asking. Shame on those journalists who's not going after that. Where that money is coming from, which individuals are giving that money. You are not looking at that. You are looking at some accounting errors. That's just so shameful, and we'll bring them up. We'll go after them. Even if we need to take them to the court, we will. But that won't stop us. That's just going to make us more stronger. So
yeah. I think, like you're saying, the gist of the message there is it should be an equal playing field for, especially in the media sense on what you're going to present. So if you're only digging, 50 feet deep over here, but we're going to go thousands of feet deep in this person's background to see that, that's where you're kind of getting to, where it's not that equivalent. You're thinking that, basically targeted on her side only, not vice versa. So, but perhaps that's because they think she might be the strongest candidate in the race, so that's what they need to target the most. They're concerned for it.
And so that's the latest poll that's showing us that we are almost double digits ahead of the game. But those things, I don't want to trust them too much because that things can change. But I look at it from who's most qualified.
Right, that's what it comes down to.
So qualification is the most important thing. And I know she's going to be fine. And we have our bariatric Friday at 3 p.m. Dr. Irgan is second time in a row. He's on his way to the studio. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you for following us, watching us, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.